Welcome to the Massacre Matinee.
Welcome back to the matinee, Kate.
Welcome back.
Third time's the charm.
Yep, third.
Happy Friday the 13th.
I know, I was going to say, well, I mean, they won't know that it's Friday the 13th.
It's Friday the 13th on
Well,
recording day, and I mean,
We've only been trying to record this episode for a,
hour and a half.
hour and a half.
Hour and a half, yeah. That's kind of... I'm sorry about that. So anywho,
Oh, no, it's fine. We just been distracted, and that's okay.
we had our snack before the recording today because I wanted it while it was hot and fresh because we're doing the pizza bomber case, also known as the collar bomber case, also known as the death of Brian Wells.
Also known as a fucking rabbit hole.
It is. It is. I've been researching this one for a while. Anyone that's listened to past episodes, there was a couple of different times I think where I said that we were going to be doing the pizza bomber case soon. We're going to do it soon, and here we are finally doing it. And I'll be honest with you, my notes are incomplete.
Yeah.
I was still writing notes like 5 minutes to bedtime last night, and
We were at work, and she's like, I'm still listening to stuff about this.
Okay, so right off the bat, there's a documentary about this on Netflix called Evil Genius. It's, I'd say, pretty well done. There's a couple.
It's pretty.
There's a couple things that I kind of conflict with a little bit.
Their timeline's a little weird.
A little bit. But a lot of information is there.
Yeah.
A lot of information is there, so that is a good place to start after you listen to this.
Right, if you
haven't seen it already.
If you want one with nice visuals too, because
and in-depth visuals, they show a lot, and they show almost everything save for a few excessively graphic points, which I understand and respect. Yeah,
I unfortunately have seen the raw video
of
the bomb detonating, and it's a little,
it's unsettling.
It's unsettling, but I don't want to be this person. But but for how much they were hyping up that bomb, it was a little anticlimactic to where they were like, "Oh, this is gonna blow up a whole bunch," and then just kind of it's like a little pop, and then.
Well,
it's tragic. Don't get me wrong.
It is very tragic.
But it's just like
they didn't. The officers didn't know what they were dealing with at the time.
But even the criminals were just like, "It's gonna do a bunch," and then.
I think a lot of it was a mind game. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
So on August 28th of 2003, you were two, itty bitty little. I would have been 11.
I'm a fetus. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize.
That's okay. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
So, Brian Wells was 46 at the time. He was pizza delivery man for Mamma Mia's Pizzeria in Erie, Pennsylvania. Around 1:30 p.m., 2 pizzas were ordered from the shop to 8631 Peach Street. Originally, the owner at the time of the shop, I believe his name was Tony DeTomo, originally he answered the phone call, and he couldn't really understand what the guy was saying, so he handed it to Brian. He's like, "Here, I'm busy, I'm doing stuff, figure out where you're going." Right. He wants a delivery. So Brian actually wrote his directions to that site all on his own. They actually photocopied it and everything as part of the case. And I don't know why it mattered, but they were sausage and pepperoni pizzas. Part of me just had to write it down.
Good choice.
I'm not huge on pepperoni. It's a little greasy.
It depends on the pepperoni for me.
Truth. I like it on something like a Supreme because it kind of it's not all greasy. Anywho. So, the address, 8631 Peach Street, actually took him to a TV transmitting tower. It was for a local news station. And that was the end of a dirt road. You'd go down the road. It was very secluded, yeah. Yeah, you'd go down the road, you'd turn right or left, depending on which way you were coming from, but you'd turn right at this guy's house, and then you'd go down this little dirt road, and then it was down at the end of the dirt road, there's the transmitting tower, and that's the firebox address. So it's technically, legally, the address for it and everything. On delivery of the pizzas to the TV tower, Wells was forced into a lock and collar bomb that kind of ratcheted, sort of like handcuffs do. And he was given instructions as well as a shotgun disguised as a walking cane, and he was directed to rob the PNC Bank on Peach Street. from what I can gather, Peachtree was like, there was like a northern and southern side. It was like business district and housing district kind of thing, if that makes sense. But it was a population of like 103,000 at the time, so relatively bigger area than where we are. But you know,
small, a lot.
Small to Steve, but
right.
If you don't get that, listen to his episodes.
Yeah.
The Ken and Barbie cases, parts 1 and 2. Available wherever you listen to us bitches.
Us bitches bitchin'.
Leave it in. So anyway, the instructions were like long rambling notes. It was like 9 pages of instructions.
Oh my god, I would have just let the bomb go off. I'm not reading 9 pages of notes.
And that was just 9 pages just for Brian. He was also getting other notes along the way, and like of those 9 pages, I think there was one for the bank employees. It was like the bank receptionist up at the top and then the bank manager down at the bottom. And then there was another like 1 or 2 pages that were specifically for police, basically saying don't fuck with this because this is tripped and that's trapped and that's trapped and this is a booby trap and this is a tripwire, and
a lot of thought behind it.
And if we're watching and if anything goes wrong, we're going to call the phone and the bomb's going to go off kind of thing.
Yeah.
All of this is information the police didn't have yet, but he had all of these notes that were given to him by the mastermind. I'm not going to say who is guilty or who is not guilty in this situation of the death of Brian Wells, because not only is it very loosely answered in the investigation, but I don't feel like all the story's there, and I don't feel like the whole story's ever going to be there. I feel like
in this one, you know the guilty like party, but you don't know who is actually like the lead instigator.
Right. The thing about this situation is there is a person that came up with the idea and the person that executed the idea that are 2 different people in this situation, and that's what makes it difficult to say who's officially guilty. So I'm just going to refer to it as the mastermind. So around 2:30 p.m. Wells arrived at the PNC Bank. Now, when he had gotten that collar locked onto him, he was pretty much told, you've got half an hour to get back here to us or that's going to go off. So he arrived at the PNC Bank and just kind of walks in. He's got his little shotgun cane. He's got a shirt on over the bomb that says guess on it. So you can't really tell what's there. A lot of the witnesses that were in the bank actually said that they thought he just had on like a neck brace or something.
Right, because, I mean, if you ever see like the videos of it, I actually do know a lot about like this case too. It's both our kind of.
We both kind of did the research on it, and that's why I'm okay with not having complete notes, because I know there's info that we both know.
I've known this case like years and everything. I was so glad a documentary was made on it, but like the shirt like was up to his chin, like you could just tell that something was there, and I could see how people would get confused that it was a neck brace,
especially when you're in a bank. I mean, you're not just staring at people.
Like I would be like, what the fuck?
Right.
Yeah, that's when I'd be like, you know what? I don't think I need to do banking today. I'm just gonna
go. So, yeah, people had actually thought that he had on a neck brace, and he had the cane, so like, oh, maybe he's like,
this man got fucked up.
Maybe he's just broken. I don't know. So, there's a couple of conflicting things. One source of information, I'll say, says that he stood in line for a second before he walked around somebody and walked up to the teller. One says that he just immediately walked up to the teller. But all accounts, including eyewitness accounts, have said that he took a lollipop out of the basket, because most banks have free lollipops for the kids, popped it in his mouth, handed the teller that note, and the note basically said, give me $250,000, I've got a bomb, this whole place is gonna fucking explode if you don't listen to me, no silent alarms, no die packs, like long rambling, like down to the letter. If you get the opportunity to just look up pictures of like what these notes looked like it really kind of gives you a little bit of an input into the psyche of the mastermind, I think.
Right. And kind of, obviously not knowing the person, but like knowing how they depict Brian and how his personality was. I like to think that he did stand in line and go, oh wait, I'm a part of this now, like I gotta go do this, not like
he forgot for a second that he had it strapped to his chest.
Yeah,
which is what makes
like,
me wonder some things later on.
Right.
So he walks up to the teller and he gives this note, and this note was pre-supplied by the mastermind,
right,
already written out and everything. And teller's like, well, I'm just a bank teller. And the manager's out on lunch break until 3 o'clock. Like, he's not going to be back for half an hour. So we can't get into the vault. Like, it's locked. But I'll give you everything that's in the drawers. And he's like, meh, good enough. So he walks out with $8,702. That is one piece of information that thankfully is correct on everything. I mean, a lot of places are just like a little over $8,000. But at least nobody's saying, oh, it's 8,374. Like, not some radically different number. Which I do appreciate. And so she gave him everything in the drawers.
Still a good chunk, especially in like 2003. That was a good chunk of money.
Right. And actually, incidentally enough, the $250,000 that they were asking for initially, as of 2022, that would have been closer to like $374,000 to $394,000.
Okay.
$100,000 because I checked that information beforehand.
Oh my god, we're
such professionals. Such professionals. But yeah, so the manager was on lunch, and Wells was like, well, I'm on a fucking time limit. I can't wait, so that'll do. And he takes that, and the next stage in his instructions was to go to the McDonald's, which was like across the parking lot kind of thing.
Go get
and get some more directions from there, because they had left him another note taped to a rock next to like the drive-through sign. Like, when you left the drive-through, it was like the McDonald's arches, and it was like one of those, thank you, come back, like, blah, blah, blah type things. So they, like, taped a note to the bottom of a rock and just, like, hucked it there, and he had to go find it, which is a nightmare in its own, because those things are all just gravel pits right there, so, like...
Oh my god, could you imagine them setting it up like, yeah, that rock right there, yeah. He'll find this. And then just, like,
and hope to fucking God that he does find it. So at 2:38 p.m., a witness called 911 to report the robbery. I believe the initial witness that called wasn't even necessarily in the bank. I believe he was just like, oh yeah, I saw this guy like walk out of the bank with this like sack of money and like something around his neck. I don't know what was going on.
And a fucking like pimp cane.
And those 911 calls are available in the documentary, but I will throw a couple little snippets in right here.
911, emergency. Yes, we just been robbed. Okay, stay on the line. Okay. Is anyone hurt? No.
The guy just walked out with I don't know how much cash in a bag. He had a bomb or something wrapped around his neck. He's sitting in the parking lot on the Upper Peach. I'm watching him out my rearview mirror right now.
So he leaves the bank, and a lot of people are like, you know, he was like swinging the cane, like happy as can be, like Charlie Chaplin. He had this lollipop sticking out of his mouth, and he walks out, and he's just walking out of the bank. But the thing that I find a little bit contradictory with that witness statement is they did have like some bank footage from when he was in there, the security camera footage. And it wasn't like solid video footage. It was like one of those ones where it's like picture and then a second and then a picture. So it wasn't like smooth moving. But it didn't. It looked like he was just like awkwardly
like he
walking
didn't know
out. Like he didn't know what.
He wasn't confident in what he was doing.
He wasn't, and maybe he thought he was gonna get in trouble because he didn't get all of the money. So he's like, what do I do now? And then he was just like, well, I guess I should just go to the next one, right? So after he got the note from McDonald's, he left to follow the directions, which took him past the eyeglass world, and that's when the cops caught up with him. So at 2:43 p.m., they apprehended Wells for the robbery of the bank. He was handcuffed. In the process of handcuffing him, he told the cops, look, like, I was jumped by these black guys. They forced this collar onto my neck. They told me I had to...
Why do they always go for the minorities and all that kind of stuff?
Right. He basically was like, I got jumped. They put this bomb on me, and they gave me instructions. The black guys thing, he was instructed to say that, both in the note and supposedly by one of the people that forced the collar onto him. And the troopers were like, oh, yeah, okay, well, he's got this big bulky shirt on. Maybe we should see what's under there. So one of the other troopers grabbed a small pair of scissors and, like, cut down the sides of the shirt from, like, the armholes down to the waist. And he kind of, like, peeked under there, and he's like, that looks like a fucking bomb.
That's a bomb.
That's a bomb.
Ooh, that's a bomb.
That's a bomb, indeed. So Peach Street was immediately blocked off. They started pulling squads in the way and redirecting traffic and basically being like, I don't give a shit, turn around, go that way. Like,
get the fuck out of here.
And you can hear it in some of the footage that they show in the documentary as well. You can hear the radios going off, and he's just like, just send them all down Interstate 90, just send them all down Interstate 90, just get them the fuck away from here kind of thing. Like, they were legitimately worried about public safety because they were like, well, that is a bomb. I don't know what's in that bomb. I don't know how big that bomb could be. I don't want to be by that bomb. So,
and they were just hiding behind their squad cars too.
They did what any logical human being would do. They called their supervisor. And
they plopped his ass in the middle of the road, and
that's what they did. They handcuffed him. They pulled him away from his vehicle a ways. They backed their vehicles away. They kept an eye on him. They did have him at gunpoint because they didn't know the situation at this point. I mean, all they know is this guy has a bomb on him, and he just robbed a bank.
Right.
So they did what any logical human being would do with that amount of information. They protected themselves and they protected the public.
Yeah.
They called the bomb squad at 3:04 p.m. Unfortunately, because they had to reroute traffic, they slowed down the bomb squad.
Yeah.
So news crews were actually there before the bomb squad was there. There was 2 different camera angles that were recorded of the entire situation. One of them was from across the highway, so there was a berm kind of blocking things slightly, and one of them was from over behind the officers, so there was a more direct shot. And that's,
I think the one that they generally use is the one with the berm blocking
the one with the berm in the way is for a lot because
it
helps hide a lot. But the footage is out there from the frontal view of Brian's death.
Yeah.
So beware, and discretion is advised.
It's not like blood splattering everywhere or all that kind of stuff.
It's sudden, and it's kind of just makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's not like what you think. Like, it's not like a movie like, oh, it's gore everywhere. No, but it's the fact that there isn't that makes it even more unsettling. Cause it shows just how much of a compression bomb it was versus it was an explosive shrapnel bomb. And I think that just makes it scarier.
No, the thing about it is the news crews that were there, they weren't just recording. One of them was broadcasting live. I believe the one behind the berm was broadcasting live, and at one point you can hear the guy saying, man, he's looking right at us, because Brian turned and saw all those people over there, and he's like, well, what is all this?
Like, I feel like, I wonder if him seeing the news crews and all of that kind of stuff like made it click for him,
made it more real.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense. By all officer accounts, Wells was really, really calm at first, and he was just like, hey, can you get the keys? Like, if you get the instructions, I'll lead you to the keys. Can you at least uncuff my hands? This is really heavy on my neck. I at least want to be able to hold it up off my neck. And he said at one point, he started a timer. It's going to go off. Did you call my boss to let him know what's going on? Like, these are the things that he was concerned about.
He was concerned about his
right. And it wasn't until the beeping started, when his time started running out, that he really seemed to get agitated and panicked and like, come on, you guys got to get the keys. And at one point he says, I don't think I have enough time now. And
you can really see him like sitting there and thrashing around and struggling, and he's like,
he's turning to face people, and he's literally just begging them to help him not die. And that's what makes me think that Brian was
he wasn't all into the plan.
Right. So at 3:18 p.m., the bomb that is attached to Brian Wells' chest detonates. Officers swarmed up to him immediately just to kind of see what was going on, and then they backed off to reassess because bomb squad wasn't there yet. Bomb squad was 3 minutes away. Bomb squad was only a mile away.
Yeah.
When the bomb went off. There was a described 8 by 10 inch impression. It was about 1 inch deep in his chest. That's about the size of a sheet of printer paper, just pressed into his chest. And the way that it deformed, it almost would have just crushed his sternum right into his lungs. So he probably suffocated when he died more than anything.
Because
we were talking about agonal breathing a few times before, and I would very much imagine that was a thing. Some accounts say that he was breathing a little bit, but that he did die within the 3 minutes that it took for the bomb squad to get there, between the bomb detonating and bomb squad getting there, kind of thing. Like, he died in that short period of time. So I don't... He would have been in pain, for sure, but I don't necessarily think he's suffered.
I was going to say, I don't think he died right away.
I don't think it was instant.
No.
That's for sure. So the bomb squad geared up. They searched Wells and his car for more bombs, and that did include cutting off his clothing. So there's many, many photos of his corpse there, laying there in the street in his underwear and his sneakers. They found the cane gun and the pages of notes and instructions in the car, and his body was not removed from the site until around 12 hours after the arrest. The collar was still attached to his neck after the detonation, and in the pictures that you're looking up, you could actually see that when the bomb was created, they put score marks on the inside of the back plate, so the original intention was for that back plate that was against his chest to explode into his chest and kill him quickly, but they didn't cut the score marks deep enough. So it kind of split open, but it didn't really shrapnel and explode the way it was intended.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it was an 8-inch wide by 10-inch tall box attached to his chest with score marks on the back plate, 2 pipe bombs on one side, 2 kitchen timers on another, as well as a fake cell phone that was a decoy. There was 2 turn dial kitchen timers and 1 electric kitchen timer, like a digital kitchen timer, which would have been what was causing the beeping, I would imagine. And there was a mess of wires and things everywhere just to kind of distract. There was 4 keyholes, but there was only 2 locks. And there was, when it was initially activated, he pulled out a cotter pin to, not he as in Wells, but he as in the mastermind.
Yeah.
Pulled out a cotter pin to start the timer, and there was a second cotter pin on there that I guess if he had pulled it, it would have given him another hour of time.
Yeah.
It was very, very mechanically complex.
Be careful if you do look up the bomb. There is a GIF of the explosion.
Yes.
Didn't realize that was a thing, so yeah, that's back in my mind. But no, a company actually remade
the bomb squad tech that actually recovered the pieces recreated the bomb as part of the case. Like I said, the collar was still attached to his neck after it detonated. The handcuff part basically was still around his neck. And because this was a bomb case, there were a couple of different government branches that all kind of tag teamed on this, local as well as federal. And in order to preserve the evidence of the collar bomb, because they didn't understand the situation completely, they made the decision, and by they I mean I believe it was the coroner that made the decision to surgically decapitate Wells in order to preserve the collar bomb, because they didn't know how they were going to be able to disassemble it.
Yeah.
The coroner did say that it was the hardest decision he ever had to make, and that to date it's still one of the hardest decisions he's had to make. He tried to say that it was done with care, but the family was still very upset because they were informed that Brian's body was not presentable for an open casket viewing, which would have given them the closure that they wanted.
Right.
My thought on it is I would rather remember the happy smiling face that I know than the
sewn back on head.
Yeah. From my understanding is they weren't able to get the head properly balanced to stay in place.
Oh my god. This is gonna sound fucking horrible, but just put a rod through or something like that.
That's what my thought was.
I'm not a mortician or any kind of thing.
I'm also not a mortician. It also makes me wonder, though, I mean, purely scientifically, it makes me wonder if they went up towards the base of the skull for the decapitation, or if they went down towards the shoulder area for the decapitation.
Ooh, I wonder if they did,
because I feel like if they had gone lower, it would have been easier to hide. And the coroner did say that he made a genuine effort to do it with care. But the viewing just was not possible for the family, and they were very upset, and his family was very, very vocal throughout this entire process. So on August 29th around 1:30 a.m., so 1:30 a.m. after everything happened, within 12 hours of everything happening, Brian wasn't even off the street yet, and the police were searching his house. his house was this cute little like cottage thing in the backyard of this old lady's house. Like they shared a driveway, and she was his landlord, and he rented that little cottage house from her. She said that he was really nice, and he loved scavenger hunts. He would do the key hunt in the local paper, and he had 3 cats, and sometimes he'd bring them outside, and he would go watch movies with his mom, or if something was going on that his mom and his mom's friend would like, he'd go with the both of them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So by all accounts, he was a really gentle soul. He was just a little bit slow. So they used an explosive breach to breach through the door of Brian's little cottage house in this sweet old lady's backyard at 1:30 in the morning. What a fucking thing to wake up to, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's ironic that they used an explosive breach to break in, I think. But they didn't know the situation of anything.
Yeah.
So they did the explosive breach as a precaution to set up any traps just in case there were any traps before anybody would enter, kind of thing. Which I find justified and makes sense. But they were able to search through everything, and they found the bomb wasn't made there. Honestly, of all of the in-home photos that are shown throughout the entirety of this case, Brian's was the cleanest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most definitely the cleanest.
Well, I mean, one of the persons had some interesting things in their house.
So they concluded the bomb was not made there, and the only thing they were able to find that was kind of interesting was he had this like handwritten note with like a list of prostitutes and their phone numbers. Because it turns out that Brian liked prostitutes, and
Brian was living his best life up until then.
He really was. I think
he was trying
really was.
to.
So the list of prostitutes was interesting because one of the prostitutes on that list had a black boyfriend, and they were like, well, he was probably lying when he said 3 black guys did it, but it's our due diligence to follow through on this potential
lead. It's the only lead they had.
It was the only lead they had. So they talked to this prostitute's boyfriend, and he was totally cleared of it. He had a good alibi. He wasn't found guilty of anything at all. He was just a black guy. So the thing about Brian is, like I said, by all accounts, he was a gentle soul. Everybody said he was just a little bit slow. He actually dropped out of school at 16 to work as a mechanic, and he had been working for Mamma Mia's Pizza, delivering pizzas for the past 10 years prior to this. So he was just going to work and coming home and hanging out with his cats and
seeing his prostitutes
and watching movies with his mom. And August 31st of 2003, keep in mind everything with Brian happened on the 28th, so 3 days later they found Robert Panetti dead in his home. Robert Panetti was actually friends with Brian, and he was Brian's co-worker. He also worked at Mamma Mia's Pizzeria, and people are like, that's 2 guys from the same pizzeria, so something's seeming a little bit fishy here. And Brian's landlord did actually say that, from time to time they would go out and they'd go gambling together, and they'd go hang out and do stuff like that. So they were pretty decent friends aside from being coworkers. So a lot of people became concerned when, after everything with Brian happened, he started getting agitated. And one witness did say that he was going around trying to find help getting protection because, quote, they're going to come after me next. I'm next. And then, so the 3 days after Brian died, they find him dead of what was ruled an accidental drug overdose because he had large amounts of liquor and illicit drugs in his system. Keeping in mind that illegal drugs was, and possibly still is, I'm not sure, but at the time it was a very big issue in Erie. A lot of people were doing crack and heroin and stuff like that. So, and crack is a big thing in this case, unfortunately. Yeah. I wish you had a little bit more input for me, but I know you're really trying not to just give stuff away because you don't know what order I'm going in.
Yeah, I know, and I don't want to feel like I'm overtaking, but I do know. I can't wait for you to get to this one part because
I'm going to know when I get to that part because you're going to burst in and be like, no, so, okay.
No, it's going to be like, this bitch.
I know you know all the details, but you're going to just have to play along with me.
I'll play along.
You remember how I told you that when Brian had to go to that pizza place, how it was, just turn right at this guy's house and go down the dirt road?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
So that house on the corner belonged to one William Rothstein.
I'm having a hard time remembering, like, the key player's name.
His name was William Ansel Rothstein. Everybody called him Bill Rothstein.
There we go. That's what I know him as, is like the bill and everything like that.
Yes.
Have you seen, like, obviously, well, yeah, you watched the documentary, but just like the picture of him, like, if you didn't know what he was like involved in and all this kind of shit, and you just saw a picture of him, you're like, that's someone's cuddly grandfather.
Right. And that's,
he could be Santa. Like,
that's one of the things that made it so shocking that he became a player in this situation. So, September 20th of 2003, Bill Rothstein, who he lived at the house closest to that location.
It was just down the road, I think.
It was. You actually turned at Bill's house, well, just past his driveway, down the dirt road to get to the transmitting tower where Brian delivered. Coinky dink. So he called 911 to report a dead body in the freezer of his garage.
Freezer.
So I'm gonna play that 911 call real quick.
Please, what's your emergency?
At 8645 Peach Street, in the garage, there's a frozen body. It's in the freezer in the garage. There's a woman there that you might want to pick up and question.
8645 Peach Street?
Yes.
How do you know that, sir?
Trust me, I know.
Who are you?
I'm the guy who lives there.
What is your name, sir?
Bill Rothstein.
And what is her name?
Marjorie Deal, D-I-E-H-L.
Okay, and Marjorie Deal is at that residence now?
Yes.
Who is she to you, sir?
I'll give you guys my story later on.
And there's a frozen body in the freezer?
In the garage, that is correct.
Do you know who the person is in the freezer?
Over the course of the 911 call, he was like, hey, come arrest Marjorie Deal Armstrong because she killed this guy and now this guy's body's in my freezer.
We just talked about that. Like, I went and looked at my freezer and there's a dead body, but it's not mine, it's this bitch's.
And that, so interestingly enough, that is in a weird way sort of what helps Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was like, look, man, I'm cooperating. I'll tell you everything I did down to the last detail.
But this bitch left a body in my freezer. Doesn't the documentary like lead with that?
It starts an episode. It finishes an episode with that, and then it starts the second episode.
Just like,
episode or part 2 of the documentary is called "The Frozen Body." So at the very end of the first episode, I've only watched this like 8 times. At the very end of the first episode, is the 911 call from Bill Rothstein, and then the beginning of the following episode, they start going into the investigation of the frozen body. That frozen body belonged to James Roden. James Roden dated Marjorie Deal Armstrong for 10 years prior to his murder. Now, Deal Armstrong and Rothstein had a history together. They met back in the 60s, 70s, back when they were both, like, young and attractive. And they dated for a while, and they were engaged for a while, and then Marjorie was like, I'm not gonna fucking marry you.
Fuck you.
So she split off from him, and he made a desperate plea in the paper, like, come back to me, my love, I love you, type of thing.
It had to have happened in like the 80s. That's such an 80 thing to do.
Late 60s, early 70s.
Well, with the newspaper thing?
It would have probably been like close to the 80s, like late 70s into the 80s.
It's just like, let me declare my love for you in the newspaper because you're definitely going to see that. Right.
So they did have a history, and that's how Bill became involved in it. He's like, I've helped her out in the past before, and she's just the kind of person that needs help. She's got some issues, so I try to just take care of her when I can. So she's like, here, I'm going to give you $2,000. I need you to take this body out of my house and get rid of it. And also, there's blood everywhere. Can you clean that up for me? And also, can you just, like, get rid of all the evidence? Like, here's the gun I used to do it. Help me get rid of this. Nobody else can help me. And listening to the interviews that Rothstein did and, like, the 911 call even, he's like, he makes 2 911 calls. One initially to be like, hey, go pick her up. And the second one to be like, did you pick her up yet? Now, the officer that talks to her on that talks to Rothstein on that second phone call just happens to be Trooper Morgan, who's someone that knew Rothstein. Rothstein was actually the best man at Trooper Morgan's in-law's wedding. So, like, he had familiarity with Rothstein, and they both recognized each other. And he's like, so, Bill, tell me what's going on. Why is there a body in your freezer? And he's like, well, you see, she calls me, and she's like, hey, I need your help. You're the only person that can help me. Jim's dead, and I need you to help me. We need to get rid of this body, and you're the only person that can help me. And he's like, well, Trooper Morgan's like, well, are you like fearful? Like, are you afraid of Marjorie? He's, oh yes, I'm so scared of her. She's so manipulative and so controlling. Like, honestly, the tone in this man's voice on this phone call just screams liar to me. And that's Bill's whole thing, is he thinks he's smarter than everybody around him.
Well, I mean, I can't remember, was it him or Marjorie that had like a really fucking high IQ?
They both did. Which I'll get into in a second. He's like, yeah, she paid me to get rid of the body. She paid me to clean up the scene. But, you know, I'm willing to work with you guys here. Like, I admit it. What I did was wrong. I feel really bad that what I did was that I did as much as I did. But, like, I was just doing all this to buy time. And I was trying to distract her to buy time and figure out how to get you guys after her. It's like, okay, well...
And so you go, hello, cops?
Well, the cops are like, well, yeah, you kind of did fuck up there, but, you know, you've got information, and, you know, maybe this is related to the Wells case. Maybe it's not. We don't know yet, but just kind of tell us what you know.
It's kind of coincidence that we're like, oh, hey, this person exploded. This person's also dead. Hey, there's a body in a freezer. There's a lot happening in a small amount of time.
And they did have Rothstein in custody at this point. I mean, they were like, come down to the station, talk to us. It's safer here. And Rothstein's like, okay, I'll be right there. Okay. So he goes down there, and they're like, all right, we're going to take you into custody. We're going to figure out what happened. And he was like, well, I'm going to work with you guys. I'm going to tell you everything that I did. So he takes the officers back to Deal's house, walks them through the scene, and says, you know, there was a bed here, and Rodin was laying on the bed at a 45-degree angle, and I laid down a piece of tarp here, and I put his body on it, and I wrapped it up, and I wrapped it in duct tape, and I dragged him down the stairs, and I poured peroxide here, and I changed the stairs because they had blood on them, and... So the cops are like, well, you're really, you know, being super cooperative. We're going to make sure we cut you a really good deal so you don't have to serve that much time, because you did kind of technically, like, illegally fuck with a corpse. But whatevs. Like, we're getting our killer.
You replace stairs. Like, okay.
Right. So, and a lot of Deal stuff actually ended up at Rothstein's house afterwards. So, like, when they went back to his house so that he could show them things about the freezer and stuff like that, he was like, oh yeah, this is the mattress that was there. And this is the thing that was in that spot, sort of thing. So, like, he was pointing out, like, the stuff that was there at that situation.
Oh, Lord.
No, it took them, when they were trying to confirm everything that happened to James, it took them a day to thaw the freezer enough to get James out of the freezer. Oh, because he was in there long enough that he was frozen to the freezer.
Oh, yeah, you know how fucking chest freezers get. They're just like oh, so
deep
much
freeze,
ice.
Deep freeze. And it took an additional 4 days to thaw Rodin himself. It took 4 days just to thaw him. They were able to get some preemptive x-rays to try and figure out what happened, but he was
and we know
curled up.
It takes 4 days to defrost.
He was curled up in the fetal position. And one of the things that drives me insane, so I'm not gonna... The lead investigator on the frozen body portion of the case was a local officer, and he decided that when he arrived on the scene, he wanted to assess things first before he let everyone else to start collecting evidence and things like that. And he pops open the freezer, and he describes it as Rodin was wrapped like a side of beef. I don't know who taught this man to wrap a side of beef, but they actually show in the documentary when they're starting to, like, stand up the chest freezer back to get everything taken care of for the autopsy. They were, like, starting to stand it up, and incidentally enough, I shouldn't laugh, but, like, his body was, like, up at the top, and it kind of and slid down to the bottom. But if you watch But if you watch that video, which is in the documentary, he's wrapped in plastic trash bags, like black plastic trash bags. Like, who the fuck wraps a side of beef in black trash bags?
I'd be a little bit more concerned if they just like wrapped him in butcher paper.
I would also be more concerned, but realistically, you can't say that that's how you wrap a side of beef. I'm sorry, I was a chef once.
I fucking butchered deer and everything like that. Like,
right.
Like, I grew up on a beef farm.
Exactly. Like, so you know more than anybody how to wrap a side of beef.
Also, fucking a side of beef. Like, what a Pennsylvanian thing to say.
Yeah.
But it's just like, oh my god.
So X-rays did confirm, as Rothstein said. Rothstein told officers that Marjorie had said she shot James with a 12-gauge shotgun, and they did find evidence of 12-gauge shotgun damage to his torso and neck area. It was estimated that he died between August 11th and August 13th. So they were able to get that pretty accurate.
I mean, he was pretty well preserved.
He was frozen fucking solid. Like, the way that the coroner described it, he said, "I apologize for making it seem so blunt about it, but it's kind of like when you get those frozen turkeys at the grocery store and you just knock on them and it's like rock solid." Like, he said it was a deep freeze. So I mean, yeah, it preserved a lot, but the weird thing is throughout the entirety of both the frozen body case and the pizza bomber case, which are very closely tied together, there was very little to no fingerprints or DNA found in any of the investigation, which is what was making it so hard for the detectives.
Do you think the body got freezer burnt?
Very likely. It probably wasn't vacuum sealed, so I'd bet anything.
Yeah. I mean, he's wrapped in trash bags.
Truth.
The only thing that I could see being in a freezer wrapped in trash bags is literally a deer head that you plan on taxiderming.
Yeah, because you can't really hurt that as easily. So, who are Marjorie Deal Armstrong? Asking the big questions. Who are Marjorie Deal Armstrong and William Ansel Rothstein? Now, normally I don't like giving too much backstory on the bad people in this, but you kind of need it just a little bit.
Marjorie's is something else.
You kind of need it just a little bit. So, Marjorie Deal Armstrong was born in 1949 to a pretty wealthy family. I believe her family had like I can't remember how her family got the wealth. I know the dad was a traveling salesman. Her dad's name was Harold. But I believe he was a traveling salesman, regardless of that information. Pretty wealthy family, pretty well off money-wise. But she was very, very intelligent, and she aced all of her stuff in school. She was 12th out of 400 students in her school. She went to college and got a bachelor's degree in sociology and a master's degree in education. Imagine that being a bitch that teaches your fucking kids. Like, whoa.
If you know what she looks like, too, she's not.
But back when she got these degrees, like, her older pictures of Marjorie, she was kind of cute. Like, adorable in, like, a hippie kind of way. Old-fashioned cute, kind of like hippie. But she was super smart, and she had the degrees in sociology and education, so she kind of knew, like, how the brain worked a little bit and how people worked a little bit.
Dude, I did some sociology work. Sociology, oh my god. In high school and stuff like that, and, like, oh my god. After taking that class, I would see how she would be so easy to manipulate the people around her.
Truth. Understandably so, because it really teaches you, like, how people think.
Oh, yeah.
And she probably used that to her advantage, because everyone that met her said she had a very magnetic personality, and she would just draw you in, and you just wanted more. And her long-term best friend actually said flat out that she was really just amazing and interesting to hang out with, but she would actually have to, like, relax after she was done hanging out with Marjorie, because she just
so draining.
She had such a energetic personality.
Yeah.
But in her early 20s, her mental health started deteriorating a bit, to the point where she actually took herself to a psychiatrist. It was kind of like, hey, something's wrong with me, like, help. She got a whole lot of different diagnoses, too.
Yeah.
Everything ranging from manic depressive bipolar to narcissistic with a personality disorder, which I kind of think that one's on point a little bit. But I also think she had a touch of OCD, because someone in her past also had mentioned that she had to brush her teeth 32 times a day. Not 31, not 33. It had to be 32 times a day. Every day. That would drive me insane. Imagine the cost in toothpaste.
How many times did they replace your toothbrush?
Right. So, as I said before, she met Rothstein in the late 60s, early 70s. They had their little fling. And then in 1984, she shot and killed her boyfriend as he slept on the couch. She claimed it was self-defense because she was being abused by him for years and years and years, and she said, I couldn't take it anymore, and this was the only way out that I could see, and everybody felt bad, and they're like, well, she does look like a nice young lady, so maybe she was being abused, and they just kind of took it at face value, and she was acquitted for it. She didn't get charged with murder. Another boyfriend of hers actually hung himself after they broke up. She moved out and he hung himself. Now, with someone that can manipulate people the way that she does, I can totally see her basically bullying someone into suicide. 100%.
Yeah.
Now, she was married one time in the past. Originally, she was just Marjorie Deal, but she's Deal Armstrong. Her late husband, Armstrong, fell and hit his head on a coffee table.
Oh, how convenient.
How convenient. She actually won a $175,000 lawsuit against the hospital for negligence. She blamed them for him dying because they didn't take care of him well enough or something. She won the lawsuit. Don't know how. Just a little taste into the mind of Marjorie Deal Armstrong.
Just really thought you could get away with anything.
And for the most part, for a while, she did. Now, time to talk about Bill. So William Ansel Rothstein. Ansel. A-N-S-E-L. I'm really good at finding those interesting names.
That's giving like German and...
A little bit, but interestingly enough, he was Jewish. He was born in 1944. Yeah, I'm leaving that in. He was also highly intelligent, much like Marjorie. Super high IQ. He was described as having a Mensa-level IQ. Super fucking smart. And he liked to be a handyman, and for a while he actually taught shop classes part-time at the school. Like
I said, he looks like somebody's
super crafty,
nice
walking around in bibs all the time with a little button-up shirt.
Oh my god, his little fucking what are they called?
His bibs? Bib overalls or
overalls? There we go. I had a brain fart on fucking
overalls. So the thing about Bill is this wasn't Bill's first time covering up a murder. In 1977, Bill actually gave a gun to his friend for whatever fucking reason, and that friend later on used it to kill a man that was dating his ex-girlfriend that he wasn't happy about. And that implicated Bill in the murder a little bit because they were like, well, this gun's registered to you, and he's like, oh, but I sold it. Which is all well fine and good, but the guy brought the gun back to Bill, and Bill destroyed it.
Yeah.
So he destroyed the murder weapon in that case, but he testified in exchange for immunity. He got full immunity because he was just like, well, I didn't own the gun anymore, and he didn't tell me what he did with it. He just asked me if I could destroy it, so I destroyed it. So I didn't know I did anything wrong. I'm sorry.
I plead ignorance.
Exactly, and Marge actually said later on that he pled the fifth a lot. A lot. But he felt like he was smarter than the cops. It's a very clusterfuck of a rat's nest, honestly. So, after everything that he went through with that, why do you think that I decided, for the first time ever, to give backstory into the bad people? Just give me a wild guess.
Probably because there's a good connection between the two. And
there's a very good connection between the two. And I'm not a psychologist, but I
when
think...
you've seen a thing or two, you know a thing or two.
I wholeheartedly think that Rothstein would have done literally anything for Deal.
Pretty sure that there is this theory of why he would do anything. Is it like he was just like fucking madly in love with her, but she just never.
Oh, for sure.
Like
for sure. She said flat out he never got into another intimate relationship. He never dated. He never married. All he wanted was her.
Yeah, and she would just flirt enough with him
to keep him around.
To keep him around and everything like that, but never actually entertained. Like, they never, that we know of, ever actually got into like an intimate relationship. But he was just like, oh, if I do this for her, that's gonna change her mind. She'll want to give us a chance. If I do this, oh my god, she's gonna love me.
Exactly.
And it's just like, oh man, and like you get that, and that's why it's so weird knowing like who is
who in this situation.
Who is in charge, because he very much was like this puppy dog following her around, but in his mind, he's really weird where he's manipulating her, but she's manipulating him, and then they're manipulating each other, and it's just
and they're
like,
manipulating everybody,
and then they're manipulating like Brian into it, and it's just like, oh man, that's why it's such a rabbit hole.
It really is a rabbit hole. So during the murder investigation, when they were searching the garage and everything after checking for the freezer and getting the freezer out and everything, they actually found that Rothstein had written 3 pages of suicide notes. First thing that he said on that suicide note was that it had nothing to do with the Wells case. They're like, well, why the fuck would you say that? And he's just offhandedly like, well, I didn't want you to think it was related. Well, nobody thought it was related until he said that. They really didn't. Rothstein had been interviewed in regards to the Wells case just because of his proximity to the location. He had already been cleared. Right, nobody suspected anything about anything.
Write this in this note.
Precisely. So in the course of that investigation, they found the suicide note. They're like, well, we found this bag with some blood on it, and they're recording him like showing them around the garage. He's like, oh, yeah, 'twas I. That was me. Did you get my suicide? Did you get my suicide note? Oh, nobody got my suicide note. Oh, like he seemed so oddly cheery about it. Like as someone that has attempted suicide, I would never be that cheery.
No.
I wouldn't attempt suicide anymore, but I really think he faked it. I really think that he wrote those notes down really fast just as a steer them away from me.
As someone who's written the notes before and only got to that process, I wouldn't just keep them laying around. I burned those and got rid of them so that it wasn't a reminder of me. I wouldn't be like, did you guys see it? Did you see it? Did you see it? Let me go get it. Let me show you. Like, I
really think it was a distraction, because he ended up telling officers that originally he was just going to kill himself, and then he decided, no, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to turn this bitch in, and I'm going to get her in trouble for killing this guy.
Right.
The thing about this whole fucking thing is, if nobody had said anything, they might have gotten away with it.
Yeah, if they didn't want to turn it into, like, my dick's bigger kind of a thing.
There was absolutely no suspicion on Rothstein, or as a result everybody else that gets involved in this, until somebody said something. There was no DNA, there was no fingerprints.
Yeah, the only thing
they had no tools or materials to track anything. They only talked to Bill because, like you said, his house was down the road. Now the thing about it is because he turned around on Marge and was like, yeah, she fucking killed him. Well, of course, you know, Marge being Marge, she's this huge raging narcissist as far as I'm concerned. They call her bipolar a lot. I find trouble with that. I am someone that is also manic depressive bipolar, and I can tell you for a fact that both from my own personal experience and from what I've been told by psychological professionals, true bipolar is not a instant snap. True bipolar is not a instant mood change.
It's a gradual.
It's a gradual. You'll be upset for like a week or two, and then you'll be really happy for like a week or two, or maybe you've got a slightly different cycle. Everybody's got an independent cycle, but it's not an instant situation.
Right. You work it works into it. Like,
the thing about the instant situation, that would be more in tune with like ADD, ADHD, with that no impulse control, and that's why I think that she might have had more narcissism with personality disorders, or OCD, or oppositional defiance, or something like that. Her own father said she lied all the time as a kid, and it was really hard to tell when she was lying, so like years of practice.
Right, and that's true fucking narcissist, but I do believe that the personality disorder is there, and that's when you can get that snap of I'm this big cheery person, and then bam, you're like angry and all that kind of shit, and you turn into like a completely different person.
Exactly,
and that's
exactly
what she really, even in like some of the interviews that she's in, you can see that.
Oh yeah. And the thing about it that I found interesting is back when she was in her 20s and she went to that psychological professional, was like, something's wrong in my head, I don't feel right. One of the things that she was quoted as having said to him was, I don't know if I know how to love.
Which makes me think that she lacks empathy.
Right. And I don't think that's bipolar. No. I don't think that's mental illness. I think that's you fucked up.
I think that's sociopath.
Sociopath. That makes a lot more sense for it in my mind. So, Deal was pissed. She was like, fuck Rothstein. He's a fucking liar and he's a piece of shit. And you know what? You guys need to investigate Rothstein arrest Rothstein for the murder of Brian Wells. And she's yelling this at the media.
Oh, yeah.
And at first, nobody questioned it at all. And then they're like, maybe we should talk to him again.
Why are these people yelling?
Right. So the police and the FBI questioned Rothstein, and they're like, hey, so she's saying that you should be charged for the murder of Wells. Like,
what does this have to do with it? Like, why was this brought up? Please tell.
What you got? Because now you've talked about this doesn't have relation to the Wells case in your suicide note, and then she called you out publicly, like, what's going on? He's like, I'll tell you everything. I'll take a polygraph. Like, totally fucking great.
Polygraphs don't do shit.
They didn't expect the polygraph to do shit, and it didn't do shit. He passed with flying colors. The one thing that stuck out to me, though, is they said he almost fell asleep during the polygraph test, so I'm wondering if he drugged himself to calm himself so that he wouldn't have those reactions that the polygraph reads to.
I don't trust polygraph tests, because you could just be
like... The FBI
like...
agent that issued it himself said, they were expecting him to pass it because he was smart enough that they would have figured out how. They know it's passable. They know how to pass it.
I think they're not more so looking for what the paper is saying on the polygraph. They're more so looking at how the person's reacting while giving the polygraph.
It's a little of both.
Because, fuck, I'd fail. I could tell everything completely fucking true, and I still think I'd fail because I'd be so anxious that I'd be clammy, my heart rate would go up and all that, and that's like all the telltale signs that a polygraph looks for telling a lie. Exactly. And I'd just be like, hand motions,
Exactly. Hand motions, So, the only thing that Rothstein said is he was like, well, I mean, I use that payphone over at the Shell gas station all the time, and you guys were saying that that's where that phone call to the pizza place came from. Like, that's maybe the closest that I've gotten is, like, maybe I used it that day. I don't know. I mean, it was months ago at this point. I don't fucking remember. So, Rothstein's testimony actually hugely aided in Deal's conviction. Ultimately, in 2005, she was convicted for the murder of James Roden, although Rothstein did not live to see that conviction.
No.
So he died in July of 2004 of lymphoma. He was just riddled with cancer all the way through his guts, which he fucking deserved.
Yeah, but
the problem is he didn't answer any questions on his deathbed, and he didn't have the ability to speak on his deathbed. The FBI talked to him and we're like, hey, just get this information off your chest. Don't die with this. And he just said, he wrote no in the air with his finger, and he died 4 days later. So Deal at the time was actually getting like long-term psych evals and treatment at Mayview State Hospital in conjunction with the James Roden case. So like they were like, we gotta make sure you're mentally stable and able to handle this and everything. So Rothstein died in 2004. She was totally fucking stoked about it, but he had already made his testimony to the court. So his testimony was a big part of her getting convicted. So January 7th of 2005, Deal just flipped a switch, and she's like, all right, fuck it. I killed him. I shot James. But I'm mentally ill. So that's what she did. Is she claimed guilty but mentally ill to third-degree murder. The inmates that have been housed with Deal the entire time were actually informing to police. Apparently she was quite the talker in prison.
Oh my gosh.
Quite the talker in prison. So much so that they were actually writing notes about details about the Wells case. She was in jail for the Roden case. She wasn't in jail for the Wells case. She wasn't even tied to the Wells case.
If I write this down, my sentence is gonna be reduced. Keep talking.
One of the people that informed, her name was Kelly. I don't remember her last name. She was actually writing notes like directly in front of March. Like, Marge said this, Marge said this, Marge said this.
Keep talking.
So she's taking these notes, and they're passing them all along to the local police, and that one particular one, Kelly, she was like, you guys gotta get this to the FBI. Like, this is that big case that they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she was like, oh, I'll get out early. I'm not sure. But those notes didn't get to the FBI until, like, months later. They got put into a folder and put into a drawer, and that folder was labeled snitch letters. It just never got passed along.
Snitch letters.
Right.
You would think that folder would be gone into a little bit more, because then, you know, a lot of people that are actually in jail are literally just waiting for trial. It's just like...
They've got nothing better to do. So...
You just imagine this bitch just talking herself up like, yeah, I did this. I strapped that bomb to his neck. Like, oh my god, he was so stupid.
Right.
Like, just talking like that shit.
So in March of 2005, Marge had been making an agreement with the FBI. She's like, maybe I do know a thing or two about this Walls case, but I'm not going to tell you until you can move me to Muncie, because I want to be closer to my lawyer. And they're like, well, you know, if you give us some solid information, we'll make it happen. And they started kind of giving, like, little bits of information, but ultimately they'd already done the paperwork, so she goes to Muncie. She told the FBI that the reason why she killed Roden was to silence him about Rothstein's bomb plot. So she's putting the whole bombing on Rothstein. So she said she killed him, but she didn't say anything because she didn't want to get implicated in the Wells case, because she's like, I'm not a part of the Wells case. Yeah, I killed James, but I didn't do the bombing. I'm not a bomber. I don't need that money. I'm a wealthy old woman. Why would I need that money? She said that directly, which always gives me such a giggle.
I'm a wealthy old woman.
I'm a normal woman, an old woman, a wealthy woman. Do I look like a terrorist to you? Yes, bitch. You do.
Really do. You look kind of creepy. Just saying. You look like you're plotting everyone's murder. I'm sorry.
Right. And she admitted that Rothstein once asked her for 2 kitchen timers, which would later end up in the collar bomb. The reason why the FBI took interest in that is because it wasn't publicly released that there was 2 rotary kitchen timers in there. And she was just like, oh yeah, I gave him to him. Like, he asked me for him, I gave him to him.
That doesn't make me a fucking killer, but I gave him timers.
All I did was I get him the timer. Now, she asked for immunity, but the problem with Marge is she didn't know when the fuck to shut up. I mean, obviously.
Right.
So she never got her immunity deal because she was just, like, talking and not, like, negotiating like a smart person.
I'll give you more information if I got this, but she was just giving it freely, so they're just like, yeah, we'll get you that deal. Keep talking.
Right. And the other thing that helped motivate them and being like, okay, I guess we can move you to Muncie, is she gave them the location of Floyd Stockton Jr. Now, Floyd Stockton Jr. had lived with Rothstein for like 2 years before all of this happened, but he conveniently moved out the day after the bomb went off. Probably because there was a whole bunch of fucking cops investigating the dirt road right next to Bill's house.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that James's body was in the freezer while the cops were investigating the dirt road right next to Bill's house. And at one point in the documentary, it gave me a giggle to notice, they were working on the dirt road stuff and everything, and they were doing like these really nice dramatic panning shots, and you could actually see Bill's house with the blue minivan in it in the driveway, not in the house. Wow, super ADD all of a sudden. So Floyd Stockton Jr. was living with him for like 2 years beforehand, and he was like, oh shit, I gotta get the fuck out of here, because he was a wanted felon. Why was he wanted as a felon, you might ask? Because he decided that it would be fun to molest disabled little girls.
Oh my god, I hate people.
So she's like, well, I can give you the location of this wanted felon pedo. Just move me to Muncie. They're like, well, fuck, sure, why not? So they end up scooping up Floyd Stockton. He's sitting in prison for his sentence, and he also starts kind of giving information. He's like, well, I will give you information for a reduced sentence on my rape charge. No, what he ended up getting, it wasn't even a reduced sentence on his rape charge. He fully served out his rape charge time. He got immunity in the bomb case. Because he was technically involved.
But not as involved as the others.
Not as involved, and that's the way they described it. The investigators described it as well, as, you know, giving him immunity wasn't really that big of a deal, because in the grand scheme of things,
he was involved just enough to have his name be put onto it, but not enough to actually be like...
Exactly. So in July of 2005, he actually gave a statement saying, well, it was Rothstein deal. They wanted to rob the bank because they wanted money. Because at this point, Rothstein was having issues with his family estate. His siblings wanted him to sell the family home that he was living in, and he didn't want to move out. He didn't want to sell it. He liked where he was living. So he told them he put it on the market for $90,000. He put it on the market for $250,000. Interesting. That's what the bank was trying to get robbed for.
Right.
At the same time, a fishing buddy of Marge named Kenneth Barnes, he was actually in jail on unrelated drug charges to this, and his family had noticed that he was kind of like spouting out these stories about being involved in the bomb plot. I was involved in the bomb plot. I'm such a big fucking man. He actually called himself Cocaine Ken. He sold crack cocaine.
Cocaine Ken.
No.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he called himself Cocaine Ken. If you've never seen, have you seen the old Batman movies with Danny DeVito as the Penguin?
Yeah.
That is what Kenneth Barnes looked like.
Oh my god.
Like greaseball, tiny little chubby man. I love Danny DeVito though. He's a national treasure.
At school we had we had a shrine to Danny DeVito in a locker.
I can't say I blame you. Kenneth Barnes' brother turned him in and was like, hey, he keeps talking about like this bomb plot thing, like you guys really need to talk to him about that. And he was Deal's fishing buddy. He also knew James Roden, but they would sit and they'd fish catfish down at the catnip.
Yeah, they fish catnip.
They would fish catfish down at the South Pier overnight kind of thing and just hang out. They'd known each other for nearly 10 years, so she knew Kenneth almost as long as she knew James. He said that before any of this bomb plot happened, Deal approached him and said, I want you to kill my father because he's spending all of my inheritance. Marge's father was estimated to be worth approximately $1.8 million at one point. And she was like, well, he's blowing all this money and he's spending all my money. And he had cleared out a safety deposit box that Marge was upset about because she was like, some of my stuff was in there. Like, you shouldn't have allowed him to clear out this safety deposit box. Now, before we end part 1, because this is going to have to be a 2-parter, and I think this is going to be a proper, like, 2-parter. Like, I'm going to finish this up next week. So, before we finish part 1, what bank do you think had that safety deposit box?
Oh, of course it comes full circle to where it started. That's a great way to end this.
That is a great way to end this. So PNC Bank was the bank that had the safety deposit box that Marge was upset that got emptied by her father after her mother had passed away. And she claimed that she needed her father to die to be able to get the inheritance because he was giving a whole bunch of money away to the church.
Oh no.
So how much money do you think she
oh my God,
needed to be able
$250,000?
Yes, $250,000 is what Kenneth Barnes asked Marge for in order to kill her father. He wanted $100,000 up front. Now his claim that he was never going to do it. He just wanted to see if he'd give her the money.
Do you think that Bill put his house up for that same amount of money, hoping that someone would buy his house so then he could be the one to give the money to Marge?
To make her happy. See, isn't that crazy?
Whoa!
I guess you guys are going to have to come back next week to figure out how the pizza bomber case ends up.
Tell us your theories of who you think is the mastermind.
Feel free, in the meanwhile, to hit up Netflix, check out the Evil Genius docu-series, I guess it's technically called. If you don't want to get ahead of where we are, only watch the first 2 episodes. But we'll see you guys next week for part 2 of the Pizza Bomber case. We're not going to do a snack next week because
it's the same case.
I'm on a little bit of a diet. We'll see you guys next week for part 2 of the Pizza Bomber case.
Go eat a slice of pizza.
Go eat a slice.
You deserve it.
We had a slice of Italian cheesy bread. I didn't want pizza. I'm sorry, but we'll
That
see you
sausage is
guys.
heartburn.
We'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, we'll be a little bit less chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye.